To my daughter Rebecca, I leave the sum of $1. The lawyer paused, looked up at me over his reading glasses, then continued to the next paragraph like he hadn't just gutted me in front of my entire family. My brother Andrew laughed first. Not a surprised laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh. A delighted laugh. Like Christmas had come early and I was the joke under the tree. My sister Patricia covered her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking. She was laughing too. My stepmother Diane didn't even try to hide it. She smiled that thin, satisfied smile she'd been perfecting for 20 years and said, "Well, I suppose Richard knew best. $1. After 8 years of being my father's full-time caretaker. After quitting my job to manage his medications, his appointments, his daily needs. After watching my siblings visit twice a year, Christmas and his birthday, while I emptied bedpans and held his hand through chemotherapy. $1. I sat in that leather chair, surrounded by people who shared my blood but had never shared my burdens, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not sadness. Not anger. Clarity. Because my father had been many things. Cold, demanding, impossible to please, but he had never been stupid. And leaving me $1 in a room full of people who had abandoned him? That didn't sound like him at all. But here's what nobody in that room knew. There was a second envelope. And what was inside would destroy my siblings' celebration and change my life forever. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, you need to understand what those 8 years really cost me. And why my father's final message wasn't what anyone expected. Quick question before we continue. Where are you watching from right now? I've been seeing comments from all over the world lately. Someone watched from a train in Japan last week. Drop your location below. I love knowing where these stories travel. Alright, let me take you back to where this really began. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 38 years old. For most of my adult life, I was known by one title, the daughter who stayed. Not the successful daughter. That was Patricia, the corporate lawyer in Manhattan. Not the accomplished son. That was Andrew, the surgeon in Chicago. I was just Rebecca, the one who never left. The one who was always available. The one who picked up the phone at 2 a.m. when Dad fell. The one who drove him to every appointment. The one who held his hand when the doctors said the word terminal. The one who mattered least until someone needed something. Growing up, I was the middle child in every sense of the word. Andrew was the firstborn son, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my father coached in Little League and took to baseball games. Patricia was the baby, the princess, the one who got the bedroom with the window seat, the one whose tears always worked. And me? I was the quiet one, the easy one, the one who didn't demand attention, so I didn't receive any. My father wasn't cruel to me. He was something worse. He was indifferent. I spent my childhood trying to earn what my siblings got for free. I got straight A's, he nodded. I won academic awards, he said. That's nice. I got a scholarship to college. He asked if Patricia needed help with her application. I learned very young that some people are born into the spotlight, and some people are born into the shadows. I was a shadow. After college, I could have left. I should have left. Andrew moved to Chicago. Patricia moved to New York. They built lives far away from our small town in Ohio, far away from our father's quiet disappointment and our stepmother's cold smiles. But I stayed. Not because I was weak. Not because I had no options. I stayed because when my mother died when I was 12, I promised her I'd look after Dad. And I kept promises, even when they cost me everything. I know what you're thinking. Rebecca, why didn't you just leave? Why did you sacrifice so much for someone who gave you so little? And the honest answer is, I don't know. Maybe I hoped that one day he'd see me. Really see me. Maybe I thought if I just tried hard enough, I'd finally earn his love. Maybe I was just too tired to imagine a different life. But what I do know is this, I gave him 8 years of my life. And in return, he gave me $1. Or so I thought. The diagnosis came when I was 30. Dad called me on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice strange and flat. Rebecca, I need you to come over. I was at work, a marketing job at a small firm downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Can it wait until? No, it can't. He had pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. The doctors gave him 2 years, maybe 3 with aggressive treatment. That night, I sat in his living room while he stared at the wall. "I'm going to need help," he said. Not asking. Starting. "Have you called Andrew?" "Patricia." "Andrew's busy with his practice." "Patricia just made partner." Translation: they have real lives. You don't. I should have said no. I should have told him that my life mattered too. That my career, my apartment, my relationships, they were just as valuable as Andrew's surgical practice or Patricia's law firm. But I looked at this man, this cold, distant, impossible man, and I saw my mother's face. I saw the promise I'd made when I was 12. "Okay, Dad. I'll help." Within 6 months, I'd quit my job, moved back into my childhood bedroom, became his full-time caretaker. I told myself it was temporary, that Andrew and Patricia would step up, that we'd share the burden. I was wrong. The first year, Andrew visited 3 times. He'd fly in from Chicago, stay at a hotel, never at the house, and spend exactly 4 hours with Dad before claiming he had to get back to the hospital. "You understand," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder like we were colleagues instead of siblings. Lives to save. Patricia visited twice. She'd sweep in with expensive gifts and dramatic hugs, stay for dinner, then disappear to take calls for most of the evening. "I wish I could do more," she'd say, dabbing her eyes at the door. "But the firm just can't spare me right now." Meanwhile, I was there every single day. I administered medications at 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. I drove him to chemotherapy 3 times a week. I held the bucket when he vomited. I changed his sheets when he couldn't make it to the bathroom. I sat with him through the long nights when the pain was too much and he couldn't sleep. I watched him deteriorate. I watched his strong hands become thin and frail. I watched his sharp mind fog from the medications. And I watched my siblings' visits become more and more infrequent. By year 3, Andrew called once a month. Patricia sent flowers for his birthday. That was it. That was all they gave. I tried to talk to them about it once. I called a family meeting, over Zoom of course, because neither of them could be bothered to visit. "I need help," I said plainly. "I can't do this alone anymore. I haven't worked in 3 years. I have no savings left. I'm exhausted." Andrew sighed. "Rebecca, we've talked about this. Hiring a nurse would eat into the estate. Dad wants family to take care of him. Then come take care of him yourself. You know I can't." The hospital. Then Patricia. "The firm is in the middle of a major merger." Patricia's voice was sharp. "I can't just drop everything." "But I could." "I dropped everything. I gave up everything." Silence. Then Andrew said the words I'll never forget. "That was your choice, Rebecca. Nobody forced you." My choice. Like choosing to honor a promise to your dying mother was the same as choosing a career or a vacation. Like choosing to care for your father while your siblings built empires was something to be dismissed. Like choosing to be decent made me a fool. I hung up that call and sat in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, and I made a decision. I would see this through to the end. I would keep my promise. But I would never forget how alone they left me. And neither would they. My father died on a Thursday in April. I was holding his hand when it happened. The hospice nurse stood in the corner, but I was the one he looked at in those final moments. He squeezed my fingers, barely, just a flutter of pressure, and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Then he was gone. Andrew arrived 2 days later. He walked into the house, looked around like he was appraising property, and said, "You look tired, Rebecca. Have you been sleeping?" "No, I'm sorry I wasn't here." "No, thank you for taking care of him." "No, how are you holding up?" "Just, you look tired." Patricia arrived the morning of the funeral. She'd had her assistant book her a hotel, the nicest one in town naturally, and she swept into the service in a black designer dress that cost more than I'd made in the last year. She cried beautifully during the eulogy, the kind of photogenic tears that look good in obituary photos. I didn't cry at all. I was too empty. After the burial, people gathered at my father's house for the reception. I watched my siblings work the room, accepting condolences like they'd actually been present for the last 8 years. "He was such a wonderful father," Patricia said to a neighbor. "I'm going to miss our Sunday phone calls," Andrew told an old family friend. Sunday phone calls. Andrew hadn't called on a Sunday in 3 years. But I didn't correct them. I just stood in the corner of my father's living room, the room where I'd held his hand through countless difficult nights, and watched my family perform grief they hadn't earned. You might be wondering when the reading will happen. It's coming. And it's worse than you think. But first, I need to tell you about Diane. Because my stepmother is essential to understanding what comes next. Diane married my father when I was 15. She was elegant, refined, the kind of woman who always knew which fork to use and never had a hair out of place. My father met her at a charity gala and was smitten immediately. I understood the appeal. After my mother's death, he was lonely. Diane was beautiful and attentive and everything my mother hadn't been. Polished where mom was warm, calculated where mom was spontaneous. But Diane never wanted children. She made that clear from the start. "I'm not trying to replace your mother," she told us at that first family dinner. "I'm here for your father. We're all adults here. We can coexist. Coexist. Like we were roommates instead of a family." Over the years, Diane's influence grew. She redecorated the house, removing every trace of my mother. She convinced my father to skip my college graduation because they had a prior engagement. She made sure holidays centered around her family, her traditions, her preferences. And when my father got sick, Diane hired a full-time housekeeper to handle her needs. But she never once offered to help with his care. That was my job. I'd be lying if I said I didn't resent her. But I kept my mouth shut. I focused on my father. I told myself that when this was over, I'd rebuild my life. I just didn't expect rebuilding to start with $1. The will reading was scheduled for 3 days after the funeral. We gathered in the law office of Harrison and Associates, my father's attorneys for 30 years. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, the smell of old money and older secrets. Andrew sat on one side of me, Patricia on the other hand. Diane across the table, wearing black Chanel and an expression of barely concealed anticipation. Mr. Harrison entered with a folder and a sealed envelope. "Thank you all for coming." Richard was very specific about how he wanted this handled. He began reading. "To my wife Diane, I leave our home and all its contents, as well as 50% of my liquid assets, totaling approximately $1.2 million. Diane's expression didn't change. She'd known. "To my son Andrew, I leave 30% of my remaining assets, totaling approximately $300,000, as well as my collection of antique watches and my vintage automobile." Andrew nodded, satisfied. $300,000 in the watches. Not bad for someone who'd visited 6 times in 8 years. "To my daughter Patricia, I leave 20% of my remaining assets, totaling approximately $200,000, as well as my investment portfolio, currently valued at $400,000. Patricia smiled. $600,000 total. She was already probably calculating how to invest it. Mr. Harrison paused. "And to my daughter Rebecca?" I sat up straighter. "I leave the sum of $1. Silence. Then Andrew laughed. That horrible, delighted laugh I'll never forget. Patricia pressed her hand to her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking. Diane smiled her thin, satisfied smile. "Well, I suppose Richard knew best. $1. $1 for 8 years. $1 for my career. My savings. My relationships. My life." I stared at Mr. Harrison, waiting for him to say there was more. Waiting for the "just kidding." Waiting for anything. But he just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read and said, "There's one more item." Richard left a second envelope, Mr. Harrison said slowly, with specific instructions that it be opened after the initial reading. In front of everyone. The laughter stopped. Andrew frowned. "A second envelope? That wasn't mentioned before. Your father was very clear. The contents are to be read aloud. Today. Before anyone leaves this room." Diane's composure flickered. "What kind of contents?" "I don't know, Mrs. Crawford. The envelope is sealed. I'm only following Richard's instructions." He held up the envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy. My father's handwriting on the front. To be read after the will. No exceptions. Mr. Harrison broke the seal. And everything changed. The room went still. I watched Diane's face go pale. I watched Andrew's smug expression dissolve. I watched Patricia grip the armrests of her chair, and I realized something I should have known all along. My father hadn't forgotten me. He'd been paying attention the entire time. What was in that envelope? I'm going to tell you. But you need to understand something first. My father spent 50 years building his fortune. He was methodical, strategic. He never made a decision without thinking 3 moves ahead. That $1 inheritance wasn't an insult. It was a test. And my siblings had just failed it spectacularly. Okay, we're past the halfway point, and this is where everything flips. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, now's the time. New stories drop every week, and trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Also, quick question. Before I reveal what was in the envelope, what do you think was in it? Drop your prediction in the comments. I love reading your theories. Alright, let's open that envelope. Mr. Harrison unfolded the letter inside the envelope. He cleared his throat. This is dated 3 weeks before Richard's passing. It reads as follows. To my family, if you're hearing this, then my will has been read, and my children have learned their inheritances. I suspect Andrew and Patricia are quite pleased. I suspect Rebecca is devastated. Good. That was the point. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. What is this? Mr. Harrison held up a hand and continued reading. For the past 8 years, I have watched my children very carefully. I have watched who visited and who didn't. Who called and who forgot. Who sacrificed and who took. Rebecca gave up everything to care for me. Her career. Her savings. Her chance at a normal life. She held my hand through chemotherapy. She cleaned up after me when I couldn't care for myself. She was there every single day, even when I gave her nothing in return. Andrew visited 6 times in 8 years. Patricia visited 4. They sent flowers. They made excuses. They waited for me to die so they could collect their inheritance. I know this because I kept records. Patricia's face went white. Records? What records? Mr. Harrison pulled out a second document. Your father kept a detailed log of every visit, every phone call, every interaction with each of his children over the past 8 years. Dates, times, duration. He also included copies of financial records, emails, and text messages. Andrew stood up. This is insane. What does any of this have to do with the will? Everything, Mr. Harrison said calmly. Please sit down. I'm not finished. The letter continued. The will you just heard was a test. I wanted to see how my children would react when they believed Rebecca received nothing. I wanted to see if Andrew would share his inheritance with the sister who sacrificed everything. I wanted to see if Patricia would acknowledge the unfairness. I wanted to see if anyone in this room had a shred of decency. Based on what I expect happened. Laughter, smugness, satisfaction. I suspect they failed. I felt my heart pounding. Andrew was sweating now. This is ridiculous. He was dying. He wasn't in his right mind. Your father passed a cognitive evaluation 2 weeks before writing this letter, Mr. Harrison replied. His mental capacity was fully documented. This will stand up in any court. Patricia started crying. Real tears this time. What does this mean? What happens now? Mr. Harrison turned to the final page. The $1 inheritance was symbolic. It was the legal minimum to ensure Rebecca couldn't contest the will, because she won't need to. My true estate, the one I've been building separately for the past decade, is held in a trust that my family knows nothing about. It includes properties in 3 states, investment accounts, and a business I built under a different name. Total value, $4.7 million. This entire amount is left to my daughter Rebecca, for her years of sacrifice, loyalty, and love. To Andrew and Patricia, you received exactly what you earned. A portion of the public estate that you waited for like vultures. I hope it brings you happiness. I suspect it won't. To Diane, the house and the money are yours. Enjoy them. But know that you married me for security, not love, and I never forgot it. To Rebecca, you were the only one who stayed. The only one who cared. The only one who kept her promise. You thought I didn't see you. I saw everything. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. But I hope this letter says what I never could. You were always my favorite. Dad. The room exploded. Andrew jumped to his feet. This is fraud. He was manipulated. Rebecca must have sat silently while you laughed at her $1 inheritance? Mr. Harrison interrupted. I was watching. She seemed genuinely surprised. There has to be a way to contest this. You're welcome to try. But I should mention, your father hired 3 independent law firms to review this arrangement. It's airtight. Patricia was openly sobbing now. 4.7 million? He had 4.7 million and he left us scraps. He left you exactly what the public will show, Mr. Harrison said. Which is more than generous, by most standards. Generous? She gets millions and we get what you earned, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since the reading began. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly. You visited 6 times, Andrew. In 8 years. 6 times. You couldn't spare a single weekend to help. You couldn't make a single phone call on a Sunday. I was busy. We were all busy. I was busy too. But I showed up. Every day. Every night. Every time he needed someone. I turned to Patricia. You sent flowers. Flowers. While I was emptying bedpans and holding his hand through chemotherapy. You sent flowers. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't want to know. Because knowing would have meant doing something. And doing something wasn't convenient for you. Diane stood up, her composure cracking. This is outrageous. I was his wife for 23 years. I deserve more than a house and some money while this caretaker gets everything. I turned to face her. You called me a caretaker. That's what you were. Yes, I was. I was the one who cared. Where were you, Diane? Where were you when he was sick? I was there. You were in the other wing of the house. You hired a housekeeper to take care of your needs. You never once offered to help with his care. You never sat with him during treatments. You never held his hand when he was scared. My voice was rising now, but I didn't care. You married him for his money. He knew it. I knew it. Everyone in this room knew it. And now you're upset because he didn't reward you for it. Diane's face twisted with rage. You think you've won something. You think this makes you better than us. No, I said quietly. I think this makes me free. I picked up my purse. I'm going to leave now. Mr. Harrison will be in touch about the trust details. I suggest you all take some time to reflect on the last 8 years. On every phone call you didn't make. Every visit you skipped. Every time you choose convenience over family. I walked toward the door. Rebecca, wait. Andrew started. I turned. What? He opened his mouth. I closed it. For once in his life, my brilliant surgeon brother had nothing to say. That's what I thought. I walked out. The months that followed were chaos. Andrew hired 3 different lawyers to contest the trust. All of them told him the same thing. It was unbreakable. My father had spent years making sure of it. Patricia tried a different approach. She called me, crying, apologizing, saying she'd had no idea how hard things had been. I want to make it right, she said. How? Maybe we could share some of the trust? As a gesture of family unity. I hung up. Diane tried to sue me directly, claiming undue influence over my father's mental state. The lawsuit lasted exactly 2 weeks before her lawyers told her to drop it. My father's cognitive evaluations, his detailed records, his video testimony, yes, he'd recorded one, made her case impossible. She sold the house 6 months later and moved to Florida. I never heard from her again. And me? I took 6 months to do absolutely nothing. I traveled. I slept. I read books. I went to therapy. I processed 8 years of sacrifice and a lifetime of feeling invisible. Then I started building. I used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for family caregivers, people like me, who give up everything to care for loved ones and receive nothing in return. I used another part to buy a small house with a garden. Nothing fancy, just mine. And I kept the letter. My father's letter. The one that said what he could never say out loud. You were always my favorite. People ask me sometimes if I forgive my siblings. The honest answer is, I don't know. I don't hate them. Hate takes too much energy. But I also don't pretend anymore. I don't smile through holidays with people who abandon me. I don't answer calls that start with, I need a favor. I've learned that family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Who sacrifices? Who stays? By that definition, I was my father's only family in those final years. And in the end, he made sure I knew it. My father wasn't perfect. He was cold, distant, impossible to read. But he saw me. He saw everything I did. And in his own complicated way, he made sure the people who laughed at my $1 inheritance would spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what that laughter cost them. Revenge is sweet, but being seen is sweeter. So tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city, your country, your time zone. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Last week, someone commented from a lighthouse in Scotland. That's going to be hard to beat. And if this story hits home, if you've ever been the one who stayed while everyone else left, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. New tales of sweet karma drop every single week. I'll see you in the next one.